Good morning and welcome to Ed's World, where it's always morning, even in the afternoon. I am your host, Jay Edgar, and today I am joined by Ben, the Common Sense American from the Common Sense American podcast. Ben, welcome to Ed's World.
Thanks very much. Glad to be here.
Well, it's been a week. One would think it would have been a slow week with what little bit we had going on here, but there's definitely a lot of information packed into the week that we had this week. So I'm glad we can break it down into some common sense possibly this week here. Uh, Before we get into that, though, I do want to, just tell a little story that I've been noticing here. Now, during Thanksgiving, I took a little bit of a break from everything. I mean, was spending time with family, and at one point, I completely shut it all off. I didn't look at my Twitter. I didn't look at anything else, and then for a couple other days too, I just didn't do anything else beyond that. Didn't touch my Twitter. Didn't do anything else, and it was just alleviating. I actually had to ask people what was going on with stuff, but I was at peace. And every once in a while, you kind of do. You just got to take that time and step away from the Twitter drama. Otherwise, I mean, it'll drive you into insanity if you're not careful with any of that. So that's what I noticed anyway out of the last week or so. Have you taken a sabbatical like that and done anything like that at all?
Well, I'll tell you, I actually did an entire podcast as to the importance of unplugging every once in a while because it's such a stressful environment at times. And just taking a step back, and even if you do it for, a short amount of time, it's actually surprising the effect it has. I spent a month in Ireland earlier this year, and I mean, I was still working for some of it, but I was mostly unplugged, certainly from the world of politics in America. And the only word for it is cleansing. I mean, it was you just feel lighter. Your brain's not going a million miles a minute. You're not worrying about things. It's sort of yeah. It's just one of those things where you take a step back and realize that maybe the world's not as crazy. I think social media sort of sends that message a little bit. We always see the extremist sides, and regular people aren't necessarily like that. Yeah, it's definitely a good thing to do. I try to do it at least like on Sundays. I tend to not look at anything, but I think it's important to do at least every once in a while. It recenters you, it regrounds you. At least that's my opinion.
Absolutely, and I try to do the same on Sundays, but sometimes I'll still get into the fray a little bit. The girlfriend and I aren't living together yet, so I'll go over to her place on Sunday, and she'll come over here. But I mean, for that little bit of time, it's the rest of the world is turned off. So
Hmm. Yeah, that's the best thing to do, honestly. I mean, when you do get back into it, you sort of you're coming back into it with a re-centralized look. You're a little more calm. You're not so frazzled. It's almost like a reset. At least it is for me.
well, that is a good thing to do, is to reset. Well, we
Yeah,
got to before we get into the topics here, we got a couple announcements. First announcement is as far as the long form two-person podcast, this will be the last episode of Ed's World for the year. We are taking the rest of the time between the holidays off because I mean, the 23rd is going to be day before Christmas. Go spend time with the day before Christmas Eve. Go spend time with your family. And then New Year's, the day before New Year's Eve, it's going to be the same thing. Spend some time with your family, get everything taken care of, recenter yourself, and for God's sakes, like we had just mentioned before, unplug from Twitter for a little while. We've got enough stuff that's going to be circulating coming on here, so I'm going to take the time and just let you spend the time with your family. I'm going to spend some time with mine. So we're going to get some guests lined up for after the first of the year, and there still may be something changing in this program here after the first of the year. I've got to make sure I take some time and get that confirmed, but no leaking anything until we get to that point. But after that, we do have a full show we do need to talk to. The impeachment vote is barreling through, and we looks like we will be seeing something coming up on Wednesday as far as a floor vote from the House of Representatives. So we're going to talk about what happened this past week with the House Judiciary Committee and possibly what could be coming into the future. 2020, as always, is barreling ahead on us. No matter what happens with this impeachment hearing, we do still have to think about who is vying to be the next president. So we've got a couple news stories there. And of course, the three questions I always ask my guest at the end of the segment. In a rare turn of events, we have some foreign policy news we need to take care of this week, including the USMCA and the preliminary thoughts of the China deal, as well as some motion in the Prime Minister's office over in the UK. We'll talk about that and a little bit about the Afghanistan papers that have come out that I have not read yet, but just what we've heard from the news so far on those. Virginia is introducing a new gun confiscation bill. It's labeled as a strict gun control agenda, and some deputies in the state are pushing back. We'll talk a little bit about that and what the backlash from the governor's mansion has been on this. And finally, we'll talk a little bit about the Inspector General's report, which is dropped. Now, I'm probably about 100 pages into this right now, so I haven't read the whole thing. But we've all heard about it on the news, so we'll talk about bit what's happening there. It's going to be all of this and more over on Ed's World. Thanks for tuning in. We are now live on Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, DLive, and Periscope for Twitter. Check us out on any of those platforms, but if you're over on Facebook and Twitter, click on one of the links for either the YouTube, the DLive, or Twitch and get into that live chat and get your questions in for either myself or the guest. If you can't catch us live, we are available over on demand on either YouTube or BitChute or over on the audio platforms, iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play. Remember, if you're on iTunes, leave us that 5-star rating and a good review. That always helps us move up the charts. Ed's World is proudly partnered with the Freedom Scoop Media Group. We have our merch shop open right now, and we've got, of course, the t-shirt that says you can tax my money, but you can't tax my 2 cents, a meme that's actually starting to fall out of favor here, so I'm going to have to find a new picture to put up here for that. We've got, let's see, this mug over here. You can go pick one of those fine coffee mugs up and have ice cream on the outside of the cup that you use to drink your coffee with. You can pick one of those over there. Or if you want some show merch, we're working on getting specific show merch right now, but we do have the t-shirt for the Generational Gap. You can go over and pick one of those up as well. Support those guys. They do a great show, and hopefully we'll see after the change in this show, we'll get some show merch for this one as well. And, of course, after a lengthy introduction, it's time to find out more about the person that's over on the left side of our screen. So, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself?
All right. Well, I'm a writer and editor by trade. I've never done a podcast before prior to when I started this about a year ago. I was always sort of apolitical as a younger person. I never really even cared. But living in a liberal-dominated state and seeing the track you take when you're in a liberal-dominated state, which is down very quickly, actually, the state's basically bankrupt. You just react because it's your reality. And the other thing is that being in a position and a job where I handle a lot of political content, you see a lot of stuff that you hope is not the reality of the common everyday man. Mm-hmm. You see a lot of extremism, you see a lot of crazy talk really on both sides. And you start to think that common sense is dying, that moderation is dying, that people are just unable to talk to each other. So I started the podcast just because I wanted to see really, is common sense dead? Is anybody even going to listen to me? Am I even going to get any listens? Because I'm not crazy. I'm not yelling. I'm not condemning absolutely everything on one side or supporting absolutely everything on the other side. Is that the only sort of talk that gets any play these days? It was almost like an experiment. I wanted to know if that was actually the case because I wasn't really sure. You sort of live in this little cloistered area where when one side always holds sway and you are always pushing against it, you feel like you're in a parallel universe almost. Like up is down, black is white, cold is hot, and you can't believe that you're the only one that feels this way. So I wanted to see if, am I really in the, drastic minority here? But as it turns out, I'm really not. And I think most people are moderates, I think, at their core. I think we're being pushed more in certain directions, but I think at their core, if you sit down and talk to everybody, you're going to find they're mostly moderates. That's what I've always been. I'm always been a big reader. I love to read. I love to be active. I love to do all these things that I think make a life worth living. And I don't understand why it's such a bad thing to seek facts and why it's such a bad thing to just want to talk. There's altogether too much screaming and freaking out as far as I'm concerned, which is really what I'm very much against. And that's what I've been railing against for a year.
Yeah, I noticed you just had 5,000 downloads on according to Buzzsprout, for your program, which is incredible. Congratulations on that.
Thank you. Yeah, 5,000 listens total. It took a year to get there, but it's a good start. And obviously with the Twitter following, I recently topped 10,000. That's a big help. And I'm frequently surprised as to the responses. Very rarely do I get anybody saying they really didn't like what I had to say. I mean, most people. I try not to be offensive. I don't even do explicit content. I'm just trying to talk to people the way I wish everybody would talk to each other. That's all I'm really trying to do.
Well, I do a little bit of explicit content just because Kappa came in, and I want to drive that point home that we're not
That's fine.
kids.
No, that's perfectly fine. Freedom of speech, first, number one.
So you kind of alluded to, part of why you came into this field here, but what was it? Do you remember what the specific event was that kind of pushed you to say, okay, I'm going to hit record on my computer and start talking and putting it up on a audio platform?
I'm not sure there was a particular event or one catalyst. I think, but I did reach a point where, again, my environment sort of, I came home, I think one day, I think I just went to like the supermarket or something. And I remember thinking, the people I've interacted with today and the people I've interacted with in the past week, there haven't been that many, but they all seem just nuts to me. And is that just me? Why am I the only one who seems to think this? Now, my family is very much shares my views, but again, we all feel this way. I think we all sort of feel we're, again, living in some sort of parallel universe. And when you're in that kind of minority, you start to wonder. So I think it was that period of time. It was right around the holidays. It was like mid-November. And I just remember thinking, I want to record something and just put it out there and see, are people really going to respond the way I think they are? Is this the way real people are? Or is it just because I live where I am? And granted, I probably don't have a heck of a lot of listeners in my state. I probably don't. But it does, you got to remember, it's a big country and there are a lot of people in it. And I'm finding that when I interact with more people, I'm finding more normal people. I'm finding more moderate people. And there was that week in November of last year where I desperately just wanted to find it. And I thought, I don't know, maybe this is, I'm not very good at tech. I wouldn't be good at recording videos. So the only thing I could really do is download a piece of podcast software, a free one, and just record my voice and see what happens. So that's really what I did.
What did you pick, Audacity, or was there something that Apple put out for you?
Audacity was first, and then strangely enough, it was a couple months ago. I used it; it was fine, and then I did an update on my Mac, and it no longer supported Audacity.
Oh.
So now I'm using GarageBand.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it was free. I mean, like I said, I'm not putting a whole lot of investment into this right now. I may have to if things keep picking up, but for the time being, I just wanted something I could use, and it works fine. I can understand it, at least the minimum, enough to get a podcast up.
All right. Well, we're going to check in with the live chat here, see what they've got going on here. Ron Helton, as always, is here supporting the show. He's, I guess, one of my biggest fans here, and he's always here. So thank you, Ron, for supporting the show. And then I've got Tote5 over on Twitch is asking to define common sense. So I guess I would say, because I titled this up as Common Sense Analysis, that, we're doing analysis for the common man. We're not a stuffed suit shirt that, you and I were talking about this off mic, where, I could write a letter and beg Tucker Carlson to come on this show and get a completely different response than what I'm getting from a common working man. So do you have anything to add to that?
No, I mean, I think we all know what common sense is. I really do. I think deep down we all really do. I mean, it's something that I think most of us are born with. We understand it, and I think we're getting farther and farther away from it when we overanalyze, when we get bombarded with a million different things, half of which is so crazy you can't even really wrap your mind around. And I think when you see something and you react a certain way, there isn't a certain emotion to it, but it's also your brain immediately snapping at something and saying, common sense, this is stupid. This doesn't make any sense. I'm sorry, I'm not getting this. And I think it's something we all feel. So I don't think it's something you can really define all that easily, but I'm convinced that most people, 9 out of 10 people, will, if you ask them a certain question and you ask them to respond with what they believe is common sense, you're probably going to get very much the same answer from everybody, if they're relatively normal as far as I'm concerned.
All right. So let's start off with the big news of the week, of course. Looks like the impeachment vote is going to hit the Senate floor. As we mentioned, we're going to see a vote on Wednesday, which I'm not 100% sure at this point where it's going to go, to be completely honest. I see now we've got people that are defecting from the Democrat Party, changing their affiliation over to GOP. We've got people that are saying they're going to defect on the vote. So, as certain as I was not that long ago that this was going to pass with flying colors on the House floor, I don't know if I believe that anymore. But we'll start off with the actual factual news here. Is the House Judiciary has approved the articles of impeachment 27-14 along a straight party line vote. I mean, there was no defection either direction. The Republicans said no, the Democrats said yes. So both articles of impeachment got the same vote. This is approved, and we are going now down into the House floor vote. So what have you seen on this so far?
I think one of the things that I take away from this is if you scroll back a little ways and when this all started, you're going to see a lot of experts basically saying that this was what's going to happen. That no one's going to defect when they do this to the House. It's going to go through the House, and it's going to hit the Senate, and they're going to reject it. And I think, I don't know, it seems to be playing along those lines. I don't think anybody's too surprised. I don't really, like you said, I don't really know what to expect, and because things just seem so garbled right now. And we are seeing some Democrats, there's two just in the past weekend that said, okay, we're done. I can't deal with this party anymore. We're out of here.
It's three.
Is it three now?
Yep.
It's almost like rats abandoning the sinking ship. They want out of this. And I think, and when you actually look at some of their leaders like Pelosi and them, when they're pushing this, it almost seems like they're not 100% convinced that this is the best thing to do. I think they're trying to act like it, but I think they also know it's tearing their own party apart and is not giving them a good look for 2020. And at the same time, they can't really back off right now. So I think they're not in a good position, and they kind of know it. So they're just doubling down, which is really what they do best.
Well, I know with Van Drew over in New Jersey, he was in kind of a Trump-friendly district, which is a rarity in the state of New Jersey, from what I understand. I'll never set foot in that state, so that's
not me. Yeah, there you go. That's a good reason not to.
Anyway. Yeah, from what I understand out of that, he was in a fairly Trump-friendly district, and he wasn't on board with doing the impeachment to begin with. But he was threatened that if he didn't go on a vote with that, the Justice Democrats and Pelosi herself were going to find a way to get him primaried and get him out of his seat. So now he can actually get up and say, okay, well, I'm going to run to represent the people, and you can throw whatever Democrat you want up against me at this point.
Yeah, well, my takeaway from this is always, isn't it interesting how the first response from Democrats always seems to be something of an authoritarian nature, as in toe the line or we're taking you out. And that's the kind of thing that scares me on either side. Whoever says that would scare me. Bottom line is you do this or we're going to try to ruin you. That is not what the nation was built on. I don't care if you're going against your own party. You're using your own brain. You're using your own thoughts. I get it. That should not be the first reaction of your party. It really shouldn't be, whether you're Democrat or Republican. But that, I think, is sort of a microcosm of what we've come to expect from Democrats. I mean, that seems to be the reaction. Either you're towing this line or we're going to make you tow it. And if you don't, we're going to do everything we can to get you out. And that does not sit well. It shouldn't sit well with anybody.
Well, and that's not the first time we've heard this either. I mean, there were a couple other bills that came through the House just this past cycle. And Cortez herself, that fun little socialist from over in New York City, has been one of them that was leading the charge that said, okay, you vote this way or we're going to primary you. There was a bunch of, I think it was the first time they tried to impeach. She ran around saying, vote for there was something else too. I can't think of what it was. Was it a tax thing? Yeah, they haven't done much, so there's not much we can talk about. I think it was a tax bill or something where she said, vote a certain way or we're going to primary you. We've got people waiting in the wings to try and come and take your seat.
Yeah, AOC is good for a laugh. I did a podcast just once addressing her, and I basically, this is just my advice from just a regular everyday person. I don't believe you're a stupid individual. I never believe that. I believe you're being misled. I don't really agree with anything or not much of what you say, but and my advice really was just to quiet down.
Mm-hmm.
You're new to this, obviously. You're a freshman in this. Shut up and do some more observation, maybe do some more research. That would be my recommendation for anybody who's new to this. But obviously, she has sort of embraced this celebrity status and is now running with it. And again, nobody should be surprised, but this is the sort of environment that we're in now, and they do, despite all their constant saying, "Oh, we don't want hate, we don't want divisions." They blame the GOP for division. I don't see how they're doing anything different. They're certainly not doing anything to unite anybody, as far as I can see.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever she talks, the only thing that springs to mind is, how many people do you want to hate you? I don't understand. Is you have a goal in mind? Because it's not working. Politicians are, at least I thought, where you're an elected official, you were elected by the people, and I think I saw a poll. It was a few months ago. It said like 13% of the people in AOC's district would vote for her again. I mean, what does that tell you? You've cratered, and you keep doing the same thing. It's the definition of insanity. I don't know why she thinks this is going to work or why this is going to help her political career. But like I said, she's good for a laugh. I don't go with people who continually, insult her and say I don't believe she's stupid. I just believe that she needs a whole lot of seasoning. Put it that way.
Well, it's interesting you bring up the fact that she's got low support in her own district. I mean, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has huge support across this country. Possibly some more support coming out of California, maybe Colorado, and places like that. But like you said, she is wildly unpopular right there in New York District 14.
Yeah, I think that's because they're seeing her. They're there. They're saying, well, okay, we elected her. What exactly is she doing for us? She just sprinted away from us, went onto the national scene, wanted to become an obvious political celebrity, and basically is ignoring us.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the general consensus I'm getting from that district. They're saying, well, where the hell is she? What is she even doing for us? What I thought, and a lot of them I've seen a few say, I didn't really think she was quite this extreme. I didn't really think that she was this far left. And she just keeps edging farther and farther and farther left. And that is just pushing everybody but the hardcore leftists and socialists away. And it's just not a good idea.
Well, and it's the same thing. I mean, for me, I'm a big advocate for primarying every politician as we go along just to make them fight for their seats. And I'm a huge person for freshman politicians. I think 70% of our politicians every term, especially in the House, should be freshman politicians. That may be an extreme number, but
I'm all for term limits. I'm all for we got to get some new people.
Yeah.
I totally agree with you. And there needs to be that these new voices, and there needs to be, the world changes so rapidly. It's so fluid. We do need new viewpoints and things like that in there. So it's not that I'm against, but if it were me and I was there, I would be somewhat quiet my first session there. I'd be quiet during that first year. I'd try and soak in as much as I could. I'd try and learn as much as I could. I would work as hard as I could, but I wouldn't be making a whole lot of outlandish statements. I just don't think that's the right thing to do.
Well, and I bring that back now, going back to Van Drew for a second here, because, now he has switched party, and, we're going to see the test whether or not they're voting for party or they're voting for Van Drew. And I think that's actually an important test to take too, because so many times in this country right now, we're voting for party. And I don't necessarily agree with that. I mean, my representative in my district, Wisconsin 1, was a Democrat masquerading as a Republican for as long as I can remember. His name, Paul Ryan.
Okay, well, here's the thing. It speaks to exactly what I always talk about, which is you use your brain. Don't just say, that's it, I'm voting red, that's it, I'm voting blue. That's a cop-out. You're being lazy. You probably will go that way, but do the work. Do a little bit of legwork. Do a little bit of research. See if this person really reflects, your beliefs. You may find that is not the case. You delve into it enough, you may find that even though you're a Republican, the person running for that is, you know what? That looks like a Democrat to me, and I'm not for that. So it's just one big cop out, and people are just getting lazier and lazier in all facets of life. That's another whole subject I won't get into right now. But it shows us just how willing people are to just flat out not even ignore. If the person's red, the person's blue, and that's how I identify, I'm pulling that lever, and that's not the road we want to go down.
So let's circle back to the actual impeachment thing that's going on here now that we've talked about who's jumping out of there. But if we look across the country, now, of course, we've got the New York Cities, the Californias, the Colorados, the Illinois that are still full force, go forward. We need to impeach this guy, get him out of here. To borrow a phrase from Rashida Tlaib, impeach the motherfucker. Bring us the man, we'll find you the crime. I mean, these places are on board for that, but for the most part, most of flyover country at this point it's actually starting to wane, and even in some of the hardcore districts, support for the impeachment and removal is starting to go away. I think people are, you were talking about this not that long ago. I think this is your latest podcast episode too. I mean, we're getting tired of it, are we not?
Yeah, we're getting tired of it. We're getting fatigued in just about everything. We're getting fatigued in the right versus left war. I think a lot of it is not based in reality. I think a lot of it is based on what we see and hear in the media. The media and social media always play up the hardest angles and the extreme side. So we start to think that's all that's out there. I think that's dangerous. I don't think it's accurate. But yeah, when it comes to impeachment, I really think they're tired, and it doesn't take much to tire people out, especially today. Their attention spans are not what they used to be. And if nothing is really happening, I mean, that's the other thing. There's a lot of people sniping at each other. There's a lot of statements. There's a lot of hard-hitting statements, but there's not a lot happening. And I think the bottom line is, especially we're in the holiday season, and I think a lot of people just say, leave me alone, at least until the new year. And I think that's what we're seeing happening just across all party lines. Even the most hardcore are starting to say, you know what? I'll see you January 2nd. I'm done. I quit.
I've already said that.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, some of the other commenters are bringing this up too. I mean, Tim Pool, who notably says every one of his shows that he talks about the president, how much he dislikes the president himself. But I mean, he brings up the good points where, yeah, most of us don't like the language that President Trump uses. Most of us don't like him for this reason or that reason. I know there are people in the audience that don't like him for his stance on Israel. There are a lot of people that don't like him for any reason, but you got to keep in mind the economy's good. We've got jobs. Everyone's going back to work. There's a surplus of jobs out there. Stick put it the best. It's the economy, stupid.
And I'm always on the fence about Trump anyway, but I will say this. I think we were at a point after Obama where we didn't need another politician. We needed a leader and we needed a businessman desperately. The country is one giant business. I don't think anybody should ever forget that. And what we are seeing, and as much as they want to stomp all over it, and I don't know how much longer they're going to continue to say that Trump is only reaping the benefits of Obama with this economy. What, are you going to say that 8 years from now too? I mean, I don't know how much longer that's going to have to happen, but yeah, we're looking at 50-year lows in unemployment. We're looking at stock markets just continually breaking records. We're looking at, and not only that, but an absolute myth that the only people he's helping are rich people. We're seeing great gains in middle class employment. We're seeing, and a lot of them stepping up and saying, no, that's not true. I'm getting a huge benefit out of this. Retirement portfolios are way the hell up.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, these are not things we should just gloss over, even though it frequently happens that we gloss over. And I think sometimes, every once in a while, Trump does tout his accomplishments quite a bit, but he shoots himself in the foot by sort of not allowing them to speak for themselves sometimes, and sort of just going, adding that next layer of bombastic talk, which you can argue that some of it's not presidential. I would agree with you. There's a whole lot coming from the left. You said it. Rashida's impeach the motherfucker. Yeah, that's professional. Yeah. So, I mean, I think there's too much of that anyway. But I also don't see actions speak louder than words. And what I want to see, I still want to see movement. We got to do something about the busted healthcare system. The immigration system is still broken. We're making gains. There's still things that need to be done. I'm not saying that we're perfect, but he is making strides in certain areas. And I don't think we should be ignoring that, although it does seem to me like the mainstream media loves to ignore it and focus more on just, his tweets.
Well, and I want to step back to what you were saying a bit ago there, where we don't need another politician. We need we need a businessman, somebody that hasn't been in this forever. And I've been convinced from the beginning, from the point that Rashida Tlaib made her statement, even from the point where he got election, where they were started looking at how to impeach the president and trying to figure out how all of this goes. They don't like the fact that he is an outsider, and I think that is what's driving this, especially given the fact that several key Democrats, including I think Nadler, said this. If this fails, if this comes out of the Senate, they're just going to do it again.
I heard that, and I had done a podcast just a few weeks before as to basically it said, I know Democrats think we're stupid, but we do know why this is sort of happening. The bottom line is you're going to lose in 2020. You're facing a big loss, and you have been looking for an opening for 3 years to impeach him. We all know this. I mean, that is just common knowledge. If you don't accept that, you're too naive to chew your own food. The bottom line is that is what they've been looking for a long time, and they found something. It's minor. It's don't even give me this that anyone would attempt to impeach Obama over this. That's not even remotely close to true as far as I'm concerned. But you might be onto something that he's an outsider and they don't like it. That's very possible. And I think the other thing is that he's not just an outsider; he's a businessman outsider, and that liberals aren't all for that. They don't want somebody who treats this country like a bit. They're not business first people as much as they think they are. They're definitely not. And this is a guy who's going, I mean, in the first few months of his tenure, he brought back a lot of work from overseas. He got a lot of things reopened over here. We had major companies sprinting out of this country during the 8 years that Obama was in office. You can't contest that. That's what was happening. And Trump brought a lot of it back, by simply saying, look, we're going to be a little more friendly to these people who helped build this country. As much as you may not like them, as much as there are problems in the corporate sphere, we do need that. And we can't have them running off to India. That does not help us in any way. And there's a lot to be said for what he's done for us. So, yeah, there are certain things he needs to work on. Certain things I don't like what he says. Certain things that he is not tactful, he's not diplomatic, he's not PC. But in other ways, you go, yeah, that's exactly what we needed because we were so far down the other path, we need to draw it back a little bit. So, if we want to get anywhere back towards moderation, maybe we need someone who's just a tad bit extreme to swing us back in that direction.
Well, before we get out of this here, and before we go check back in with the live chat, I want to talk a bit about what's going to happen out of the Senate because under most betting odds right now, we're looking at the fact that they'll scrape up enough floor votes to get the impeachment statistic out of this. They can afford, now that Van Drew is out and the other two have jumped ship as well. Two of them have switched to the GOP. One is still independent at this point. They're at a point where they can lose 17 votes and only 17 votes. So it's a razor-thin margin out of this. But it seems like this is partisan fueled, so it looks like we're going to go through this. So if this does get to the Senate, there are two options that Mitch McConnell has to do this. Now, Roberts is going to preside over this, but Mitch McConnell is going to be the one that's hectoring the votes now, and he'll be taking over the procedure on this. First off, a lot of people are saying now that the best thing for McConnell to do is to just spike this, get the vote in, get the trial done, and go back to work to kind of show the message of we're not going to take any of this seriously. We're going to punish the people that want to do this and say you cannot impeach because you don't like a person. But the other strategy that I looked at going into this, and I'm going to do a dedicated video on this. I think I'm going to do that tonight or tomorrow. I'm going to do a dedicated video on this, is the fact that Mitch McConnell can also drag this out until November of next year if he really wants to do it that bad, which takes Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders off the campaign trail.
It's interesting to me just how often I look at a piece of news and I go, it seems to me like this is all going to backfire on Democrat candidates at this point. It almost doesn't seem like Trump is risking much. It's everything that comes back. At the start of this, we didn't know that much about the whole Hunter Biden thing, did we?
No.
All of a sudden, that just lands right on their heads. And every time you turn around, you realize that the fallout of this, whatever that may be, whichever tactic they decide on, it seems like that's going to land much harder on Democrats than on Trump. It just seems that way to me. Am I the only one who thinks that? It looks that way.
No, it seems, and it's not just the impeachment thing or anything else about that. I mean, people are scouring the Constitution to try and figure out how to get rid of the president and realizing how much the federal government has grown beyond its means and is fucking the middle class because they realize what the Constitution said it in so few words. The first commandment of the Constitution of the government is, "Thou shalt leave me the fuck alone."
Yeah. Yeah. Well, being someone who identifies as basically libertarian crossed with conservative, if there is such a thing, I'm all for that. And the bottom line is, like you said before, we can't be impeaching somebody because we don't like them. We can't be making up rules of due process to push this through. We can't be doing any of this. It's sort of making a mockery of the Constitution. It's making a mockery of the whole system. And I think that's actually contributing to the fatigue we talked about earlier, because none of this is happening the way it should. None of this seems correct. Through the correct procedure. It seems so partisan driven. So again, we're just being separated again into two separate camps and a lot of jabbering. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know how this is going to end. I do know one thing. I really, really need it to end soon, because we need something else to focus on in the new year. Let's focus on the elections, please. 2020.
Yeah, I've always said too. I mean, we get this I said right at the beginning, I said, forget the investigation. We all know how the House is going to vote. We all know how the Senate is going to vote at this point. Forget the investigation. Vote, and come together and start repealing a bunch of laws.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think one thing we're going to start seeing, especially, when 2020 starts to really start rolling and people are going to, they're really on the campaign trail, you're going to see people basically, I don't know if the lines are going to be drawn quite as clear as they used to be. I have come across some people who have said that the extremism has pushed me actually the other way now. And now I don't know which way I'm going to vote. If you look at polls today of who they're, okay, Trump's leading here, Biden's leading here, I don't put a heck of a lot of stock in that, because if you look at some of the polls and surveys where they have undecided, that's a huge number. The undecided right now is very, very high. So there's a lot to shake out come 2020. And that's really what's going to be most interesting, because a whole lot of people are on the fence right now, aside from people who are hardcore on both sides. And I think I sort of am too a little, but based on what I'm seeing in the candidates on the Democrat side, I can't see myself voting for any of them. I can't imagine it. But at the same time, I never like to make predictions. That always turns out bad for me.
Well, we're going to check in with a live chat here, see what everyone's got to say, who's coming up on here. Looks like we got some people in and talking here. Big Cat Kayla says common sense is not objective, which I don't know. I think it kind of is to a point. I mean, people are going to see some things differently than others, and morality is going to favor into that.
Right. I mean, not everyone's going to say the same thing. Everyone's believing the same thing. But the instant you start believing that common sense is predicated upon a person's personal opinion is the instant that starts to die, because it's not. It's something inherent in all of us that I think we do know. And that's just the way it is. It will be swayed by our own opinions and emotion. But for the most part, I am not a big fan of getting away from objectivity when it comes to hardline stances on common sense. I think we've all got it.
All right, and Ron Helton has been busy here. So he starts out, this is a partisan impeachment, just like the hit job on Clinton, which I'm surprised to hear someone from the right cite that the Clinton thing was a hit job. It definitely was, but generally they're not citing that. They think the GOP was a hero in the 90s for impeaching Clinton. Instead of stopping the warmongering corruption of the money system, they give us distractions.
Yeah, well, distractions are, I mean, as far as I can tell, the entire political game is distractions at this point. What are they actually doing? I suppose that's my question.
Yeah.
What are these? They're elected officials. People put them in office. Especially during this impeachment process, what the hell have these people been doing? Just a question, because I don't see a heck of a lot happening.
Jersey Linda says hello to me. So, hi, Jersey Linda. Thanks for watching. Ron Helton says the public needs to stop idolizing the office of the president. He is the head of the executive and the commander-in-chief, not the king. I've said that numerous times.
I think that stands to reason. Again, common sense. That's common sense.
Yeah.
He's not a king. We know he's not a king, and no one should treat him like a king. I don't see what, if you are, then there's something wrong with you.
It's not just that he's an outsider, it's also the fact that most of the ultra-rich in the media industry supported and donated to Hillary, and she lost. They don't like losing ever. Trump is not tactful. Of course he isn't. And Hillary laughed during the interview where she bragged about being part of the killing of Gaddafi. Pure evil.
Oh yeah, that's a video that gets around quite a bit. No, Hillary would have been an absolute disaster.
Oh, God, yes.
That I'm convinced of.
Ron Helton says, I vote to end the government. They stopped defending liberty decades ago. Yeah.
Um, like I said, being partially libertarian, I understand what he's saying. The only problem is I think we've reached a sort of point where, well, I mean, objectively speaking, it would be difficult for government 350 million people. You're going to need some form of organization there. And I mean, I certainly want less government. The bloated government, federal and state, especially the state, is out of control in a lot of them, especially the liberal states. All that needs to be way scaled back. I'm on board with that. That's just crazy.
So let's get into 2020 here. Now, the first thing I've got here to go with, let's get the picture up, is this week's RCP polling on here, which shows Biden on a downslide, and everybody, legitimately every other single person on the top six is on an upslide. Biden has dropped to 27.4 nationally on the aggregated, and Sanders is sitting in second at 19.3. And of course, Iowa's coming up here. Buttigieg continues to lead in Iowa. He's at 3.2 plus. Sanders has taken over the lead in New Hampshire, slightly ahead of Buttigieg by 1.3, 19.0 to 17.7. And the betting odds continue to favor Biden, but at a slimmer number as well, at 25.3. So the top story I want to talk here is the fact that Mayor Pete is continuing to rise in the polls.
Yeah, he is, and I haven't looked as much into him. I know a little bit about him. I think he's sort of taking advantage of Biden's continual miscues and taking advantage of the fact that I think he's trying to bill himself as not being as certainly as far left as Bernie or even Warren. And I think he's taking advantage of that. And Biden right now is the default pick. I mean, that's just the way it is. He's the default candidate at this point, and he has been the whole time. Even when he goes up and down, no one else really passes him for any significant length of time, and that says something. And it says something to me because he's sort of a milquetoast candidate. He doesn't really do much. He creeps me out, but he doesn't really do much. He doesn't really say much. He's about the most moderate of the candidates, I would say that, which is really interesting that he always seems to be leading. Doesn't that speak to more moderate people in this country? Mm-hmm. But as far as Buttigieg, I think he's I think he's trendy. I think he's sort of, I don't want to say flavor of the month because he continues to tick upwards, but he is taking advantage of the fact that Biden is not exactly an explosion of personality there, and taking advantage that the other candidates are they're straying too far left. Although, let's face it, Buttigieg, some of the stuff he says is pretty far left too.
Oh, yeah.
And you start to wonder, does it matter? Are they all just going to basically, it's going to be like mass cannibalism on the Democrat side? They're all just going to eat each other alive and Biden will be left. That's it. That's what I think is going to happen.
And again, I mean, it's interesting the point that he's rising in the polls because he's sitting on states like Iowa and New Hampshire right now. But I mean, he has got 0% black vote, and he is stagnant in places like South Carolina. So yeah,
he is, and we should not forget that Trump has a very high percentage of the minority vote in a lot of places, and he has a great following on that side, and to the idea that the media has been pushing for 3 years that he's racist, which I have frankly not seen any evidence of whatsoever. But I think that it is interesting that they just don't like Buttigieg at all. Minorities don't like that guy. And frankly, I don't really know why. I don't know enough about him. There must be something in his policies or the things he says that they really don't like. Because they really don't like him at all. I'm not sure why.
I think it's the homosexuality. I'm not going to lie. I don't want to make it a wedge issue on the guy or anything, but
yeah.
I mean, the black vote, the black electorate does tend to be, for the most part, especially on the elder side, more religious, even though, they go to the Democrat side for the racism that they try to put on the Republicans.
Hmm.
they tend to have that religious aspect. They tend to be Protestant
Yeah.
Episcopalian.
Hmm. Yeah, very often, and that you're right. That could very well be factoring in, especially along the Bible Belt and in the Southern states. That's going to be a big. That's going to play a big part.
Hmm. And speaking of people who are never going to make it to the, or we thought were never going to make it to the end anyway, we've got another debate coming up here. I believe it's coming up this week, isn't it?
I think so.
And Tulsi Gabbard has refused to attend this coming debate.
She has. I didn't know that.
I don't know if she's qualified for the next
I
debate.
didn't. I was going to say, is she?
But she says if she qualifies, she's not going to attend. And a couple of other Democrats, I was just kind of looking around. It seems like they've shadowed her enthusiasm. They're not going to attend either.
Maybe it's because they don't see much point. There's no way Gabbard gets the nomination.
Mm-hmm.
It's really down to 3 or 4 people right now, and I think if you're outside of that, I'm not sure they see much point. Maybe it's as simple as that. But it could be, as far as Gabbard goes, she's sort of on the fence sometimes, and a lot of Democrats don't like her, especially the far left. And I think that might be a sign that she's distancing herself even more from the Democrat Party, and she's sort of hedging on full-on independent. I don't know, but I've never really disliked her. I've always thought that, again, she's one of the more moderate candidates, and again, I'm all for that. Obviously she's a Democrat, but still there are some things she says that make sense. And I think that if she says, oh, that's it, I'm not doing this, I'm bowing out of this, it could be a little of both. It could be a little of, well, I'm not getting the nomination anyway. And also, I don't really like anything these people are saying right now. I think it might be a little of both.
Well, and it's honestly, these debates that we're having, especially when we have the big 10-person 2-night debates, are pointless at this point.
Yeah.
They are completely pointless. People are coming in to get their sound bites that they can use with commercials. They're not actually discussing any ideas. And of course, MSNBC and CNN are playing kingmaker for everything, making sure Warren gets the majority of the mic time, making sure that Biden gets his mic cut before he says something stupid, and not giving Andrew Yang any sort of mic time at all.
Right. I remember thinking, how scripted is this? I mean, they obviously have a plan who's going to get to talk and how much. Doesn't that just tell us right there, I mean, who the obvious candidates are, and everyone else just shut up and go home? I mean, that's and it's a sign to everybody watching, too. I mean, we're not Yang, go away. You're no shot of this. Why are you here? I think that's sort of what they're saying. And maybe that's another reason people are declining, because it's probably pretty insulting to stand up there and just basically being completely ignored.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I hate to say, I think Andrew Yang has been the token Asian guy.
Yeah. And he was the one with the $1,000 for everybody thing,
Yep.
right? That was him.
Communism light, however you
Yeah.
want to put it.
I read that one. Oh God, that isn't going to work for any reason. But I don't think he's a particularly stupid man. I think he knows he's doing what he wants. But they're not going to give him any playtime. It's 3. With Buttigieg being the wild card. That's what it is.
Yeah, that I can see. We do have a little bit of news in the stack here coming from the House side as well, but it had to do with Sanders, so I threw it in the 2020 watch here. And that is that Bernie Sanders went all in for Cenk Uygur when he decided he was going to jump up and take Katie Hill's former seat after she was disgraced. And now he has changed his mind on that and retracted his endorsement based on many sexist things that Uygur has said in the past, of course, and some of the anti-Semitic things that he's also said as well, which I know Bernie Sanders is not a practicing Jew, but I know he's ethnically Jewish.
Right. I didn't know. The person who wants to take her seat. I don't know much about that guy. What did he? Does it say what he said? Like the sexist?
Oh,
comments?
he has said all. It's Cenk Uygur, the guy that debated Ben Shapiro a couple years at
Okay.
Politicon,
Right.
and one of the hosts for the Young Turks.
Okay. Oh God.
The realization. Yeah. The realization.
I'm out. Don't elect him to anything. Do not vote for that. I don't care what he's running for. Don't do it. As much as I don't like to, just sort of do that dismissive type thing, I try to remain open-minded, but you got to be kidding me. I think Sanders is another one of those people. Actually, My mother knows somebody who was a big, very close to Sanders 20, 30 years ago. Actually, even lived with him, and honestly could write the book of his biography if she really wanted to, but she doesn't want to. And one of the things that shows that he's a little more flighty than people know. He'll sort of go back and forth on a lot of things, not socialism, but on a lot of other things, and backtrack all of a sudden, and he'll react too quickly, like I'm for that person, and then the next day, oh holy crap, I don't want to be for that guy. So he's got a little bit of a temper. So it's interesting to have that happen, but it doesn't really surprise me that he is Jewish, right? Is he not? He's not a practicing Jew. Ethnically, okay. So I mean, obviously, we don't want anybody who's sexist or anti-Israel there anyway. I don't understand why that. Again, more common sense. We don't want the sexist. We don't want the racist. We get it. We don't want that. So on either side, and I don't think it needs to be shoved down our throats any more than it already is. I think I'll just leave it at that.
Well, and the thing with, Sanders too, up until he started, peaking in New Hampshire, which, there's no mystery why he's peaking in New Hampshire right now because he lives right next door. But,
yeah.
For the most part, we all assumed that he was just going to play kingmaker throughout this entire thing, that he wasn't going to be a viable candidate for anything. And, everything is up in the air right now, which blows my mind.
I know.
Biden came in at 43%, and now everybody's within a few points of each other.
Yeah, it's great. That's why I say Biden's sort of the. And actually, I was just watching the feed here. Ron Helton just said, Yang is not stupid. He's just appealing to the lazy and those who look to the government to provide for them. With over 50% of the population now receiving government assistance. He's playing numbers. He's absolutely right. The sheer amount of assistance that we pay out already makes us borderline socialist as is, and the percentage of people receiving assistance is out of control and needs to be stopped. And he's, that's absolutely what Yang is playing on. It's absolutely what socialists are playing on. I have often said that a civilization starts to entertain socialism when a civilization starts to be less competent, when it starts to be less driven, when it starts to sit on its laurels and decide that they want things given to them as opposed to things earning, when they start to believe that they simply need things and deserve things just because they draw breath. This is the reverse of JFK's famous statement.
Oh, absolutely.
This is the absolute reverse. And to believe that that's the right way to be, or to believe that we're going to get anywhere with that, is just, that's the one thing I can't not figure out why anybody would support. As many times I've tried to, I've even read certain things and tried to figure out how you ever could think that this could work. And being somewhat of an Ayn Rand disciple myself, and having read The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged and her biography, and just sort of, that is common sense to me. That is obvious. You cannot keep giving people something for nothing and expect to get anywhere, no matter how you break it down, no matter how you rationalize it. Until we start re-embracing individual achievement and accomplishment and drive and discipline and pride and all these things that help build this country, we're going to continue to regress. Our education is going to continue to regress. Our accomplishments are going to continue to trend down. And eventually, we're having people graduate from school, frankly, that can barely read an ad. And here's a thought: throw out the social justice garbage from your curriculum and go back to learning things. That's that. I just mini rant over. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Well, and it's the education system too. My girlfriend is going in for social work. It requires a math credit, which, given where she's placed, put her into general math, which means Common Core math, essentially. Here, I looked at that one day. Now, background here, I struggled with biology history, but I was kind of a prodigy when it came to math physics here. And I took calculus when I was in middle school. Whoa. I looked at what she brought back for general math, and I'm like, what? This doesn't make any sense. How do you figure out how to do this?
What, it was complicated?
Yeah, it was overly complicated.
Why she's in for social work and she needs to take this?
That's general ed.
Oh, okay. I'm pretty much the opposite. I was never very good at math. I was in math courses, but I always needed help to get through them.
Mm-hmm.
So like I took algebra in 8th grade, and I remember taking calculus, and when I was a senior in high school, I still needed help.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just got the hell out of there in college. I got my C and left. But for English and history and things like that, I was always much better. But yeah, education in general. I don't know what's happening. I don't really understand the emphasis on certain things in schools, especially young kids. But that's a big part of it, and we're starting to send messages that they should not be getting, which is you deserve things that simply because you're a citizen or simply because you're alive, you should get. It's a dangerous path, plain and simple.
Well, I got one more story on the stack here, then I'll have 3 questions for you at the end of this, based
Okay.
on what we saw in polling this week in news. But the last thing I want to point out to the fact is that according to a Harris poll this past week of 1,829 people, Hillary Clinton, who is not running, is leading the polls for the Democrat Party by 21% to 20%. 21% Hillary, 20% Joe Biden.
Yeah, I saw that. Short translation is Democrats don't learn. They're just not gonna. I don't know why you would do that. She got just dumped off the planet. I don't understand why that seems appealing. I honestly, though, I think that also speaks to the weakness of the Democrat candidate.
Mm-hmm.
If you had really somebody who was a really strong contender right now and was really trending way out and it was obvious, I mean, more so obvious than Biden is right now, yeah, I don't think you'd see that. I think this is just desperation. We want Hillary back, and a little bit of the, well, we need a woman in there somehow, and it doesn't look like Warren's going to make it, so let's get Clinton back. And then I actually do believe that there are a small percentage of people who really just want to see Clinton and Trump lock horns again. To hell with it. I don't even care how it comes out. Let's just throw them back in the ring.
I didn't even know what to think when I saw that. That blew my mind that she's. And of course, there are people out there that are pressuring me to run, and I don't know if I should get back in or not.
Yeah. First of all, and I don't know why this is being hidden, but there's something wrong. She has Parkinson's or something. Something is really, really wrong. She is absolutely ill. There's something definitely physically wrong with her. And I think that's the only thing that's stopping her from running. She says she won't run. And I think that's the reason why. We're hearing a lot. She had a coughing fit in an interview that could not be stopped a few times ago. There are lots of times where she stumbled and fallen down. She's not old enough for that to be happening just based on age. There's something off there. That's first. So I don't think she can run. No, the other reason Sanders can't run, he wouldn't make it through a term. But I think when it comes to Hillary, there are a lot of people who thought that she got jit because it was sexism. They didn't want a woman as a president, as if this is 1971 or some crap. The bottom line is she lost because she would not make for a good president, and she would not win if they ran her again. I don't think there's any way that she would run. The one person that would scare me that no one brings up, and she probably doesn't want to run anyway, is actually Michelle. Michelle Obama, I think she would be actually almost too moderate by today's DNC standards.
Absolutely, and I thought the same thing about Oprah.
Yeah, exactly. So they're almost two. Before they were away, now they're over here. But I think she would be the only one, really. I think that could give Trump a run for his money for a variety of reasons. But I don't think she has any interest in running anyway. But Hillary, yeah, no, don't. Especially with the family past. Good God.
With Hillary running, that kind of strengthens this is not one of the 3 questions, but something I want to ask you about on this. You're old enough to remember, well, not remember, but to be aware of what happened in 1984 with only Minnesota going Democrat.
Well, I was only 6
Yeah.
at the time. But I do know what you're talking about, though.
Well, I've had a lot of younger millennials and Gen Zers on this show where I'm about to say something that they have no idea what I'm talking about. Do you think they're just trying to find the right Walter Mondale to throw up there right now?
Maybe. I think it's possible. Poor Mondale. Yeah, I remember. I do remember hearing a lot about it. I still remember. I think I remember hearing my parents saying or something. It was either my father or my mother. We were in the kitchen or something, and one of them saying, "Who the hell's Walter Mondale?" Like, I don't even know what the hell are they doing. What are you talking about? I don't even know that. But yeah, I think that's definitely possible. It's no matter what they do, though, it's going to be an absolute circus in 2020.
Well, I've been kind of watching the live chat here, and it's been kind of busy. But before we end this segment, I've got three questions that I always ask every guest that comes onto this show. So the first question, based on the polling statistics we've seen, based on the news stories that came out this week, who do you think has the best chance right now of becoming the Walter Mondale, the Democrat nominee for 2020, currently running?
Um, I really think simply because there is just going to be so much infighting and they're just going to take each other out. I really think the default is Biden. It's just going to end up that way. I think that in the end, they're going to realize that if they run someone too far left like Bernie, they got no shot. If they run Warren, she's too inconsistent. She's not likable. She just isn't. And they're just going to come back to Biden. I really don't see it being any other way. That's my prediction.
All right. And question number two, if for whatever reason, say Trump strokes out on the campaign trail and Pence can't pull together a candidacy in time or a campaign in time, you have to have one of these 15 people that is running for president right now as your next president. Which one do you see as the lesser of 15 evils?
15?
Yeah.
What are the 15?
There are 15 people running right now.
Total. Oh, you mean total of
Yeah.
all of them?
Yeah.
Here's the thing. I don't know if I can answer that. I think the lesser of the least evil. I don't. Gabbard can't run, right?
Gabbard could. She's running.
Yeah, I honestly, based on what I've seen, just because she seems to be the closest, I would go with her. There are a few other people that I've sort of been mildly intrigued by, but I don't know enough about. None of the top 7 or 8 I would ever go anywhere near. I don't think. It's going to have to be somebody on that lower tier, somebody that Gabbard probably would be my pick.
All right. And now the last question is that for pure entertainment value, no statistics, no policy prescriptions, just who do you want to see on that debate stage? Who's going to be the most entertaining person to run against Trump in 2020 out of the 15 that are running?
Out of the 15. It's got to be Bernie. He's so crazy. He's so nuts. And those two are so diametrically opposed in just about every feasible way that they are going to have absolute freak out screaming matches that happened on there. And neither one of them are above it. That's the other thing. Let's not forget that. Neither one of them are going to shy away from that kind of thing. They're both just a little tweak shy of completely sane as far as I'm concerned. So, and Bernie's way gone, and that would be just fantastic.
Two old people screaming at each other in New York accents. I love it.
It'd be fun.
All right, let's check back in with the live chat here. So the last thing we saw was Ron Helton voting to end the government. Wyatt from Roundtable Decision is here. Says hi to both of us. Jake from Freedom Scoop. Biden is the part of the muffin that left in the wrapper after you eat the top part. I don't know if that was grammatically correct, but I know what he was trying to say.
I know what he's saying. He's right. That sounds about right.
Wyatt says Pete 0% black vote is barely even covered in the media. Yeah, that's true.
That's true. That's true.
Ron laughed at Jake, and then he points out the fact that Pete is the current media darling right now. So he's the one that the media are trying to prop up right now. But I mean, like you said, Biden is going to be the default, I think.
Yeah.
And then Wyatt says, "Hey man, tend to agree." Darkness 5632 over on Twitch. Thanks for tuning in. The 2020 Democrat field reminds me a ton of 1976. Only difference is we do not have an outside the box candidate like Carter to lead this time. I could see that.
Yeah. Yep. A little far back for me, but I understand.
We need someone like him in 2020 if we have any chance to ever trump. I think it's going to be ever beat Trump, but sadly, Democrats will not use an outside-the-box candidate like Carter. They're just going to go with the establishment candidate, which, I mean, Bernie's establishment now, so yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah, and he's right. They're not willing. They're just not willing to think outside the box here.
Wyatt says Yang is always trending on Twitter, which she is. Uh, Darkness 5632 says it's going to be either Warren, Biden, or Sanders. Yeah, most likely. They're leading, and they've got the positive news coverage.
Yeah.
Ron Helton says Yang is not stupid. He's just appealing to the lazy and those who look to the government to provide for them. With over 50% of the population now receiving government assistance, he's playing the numbers.
Yep. That's the quote I mentioned before.
Yep. Oh,
Totally.
sorry, you said that.
Yep.
Ron says, how is it that Biden has not been frog marched off the stage in a straitjacket with all those insane comments that he made? All I know is that I like to pat the hair down on my leg and watch it stand up back too, but I won't let anybody else do it. Ron Helton is reading Atlas Shrugged now. I saw the movie about 3 years ago. That is, after Steffi Cole read that, I actually put that on my reading list, so that's going to be coming up for me in the near future.
Atlas Shrugged is it was, I wouldn't go so far as to say life changing, but it's something that's going to make, I think it's going to clarify a lot of things for people. If they're even a little bit on the fence, they're going to start to realize that there's one way to live this life, and it's not political in my view. It's philosophical. It's a life philosophy that you should embrace. It has, and I think it's right towards the end, right at the end, where John Galton and Dagny are standing together, and it's either the last line or one of the last lines where she says to him, we never really needed to take these people seriously, did we? He says, no, we never did. In other words, we are the doers, we're the achievers. It doesn't matter what they say. We're going to leave them in the dust anyway. Plain and simple.
And lastly, Ron Helton says the new math method of teaching seems to be designed to intentionally confuse the students, and I can see that definitely.
I have a friend who, very much like you, very good at math, and he'd probably say the very same thing. In fact, I think when we were in college, he said to me, he says, he was a math major, and he says, they're teaching math backwards.
Yeah, and that I can see.
And I said, what do you mean? He says, they're teaching it backwards. They're teaching what we should learn later, and it's just completely backwards. You're not supposed to learn. They're trying to teach us like the whys and stuff like that. First we need to know the basics first. And I remember him thinking, he was in class once and he came out and he says, I don't know why I think this, but like I have a feeling I'm going to do much better later in my degree than I am right now. And he actually did. He had an easier. Not sure why. I don't know enough about math, but he made that statement. I just always remember.
All right, so we don't talk a lot of foreign policy on this show, but there are some things that popped up this week that we got to talk about. Kind of lumped it all into one topic here, so we'll check back with the live chat after we talk about these 4 stories that I have up here. First things first is on the same day that the articles of impeachment were announced, the House of Representatives announced that they are going to, with a couple of edits, approve the USMCA, the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement. Hooray. But this is something that's really important that we need to... This is something that's needed to pass for a long time because it's been sitting on the table. NAFTA was garbage. The USMCA, in my opinion, was better. It wasn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination. But, being in the middle of the country, I live in Wisconsin, this is going to be huge on farmers because we're not going to ship milk and stuff over to China, who is our biggest trading partner. Our market is going to be internationally in Canada and Mexico for our dairy. But what have you seen on this story?
The one thing I've seen, the one thing I've taken away from it, honestly, we were talking earlier about, Democrats being sort of all caught up in this impeachment and supposedly being elected officials, and me asking, what the hell are they doing? This is an example of them not doing their jobs. This should have been passed a while ago.
Well, yeah, it's been sitting on the table for a year.
Yeah, forever. This needed to be done, and it was basically done. I mean, it was only lacking the approval. And Trump did say, he was accurate in saying it. They've been dragging their feet on this. Now they've got an impeachment, and they're still dragging their feet. And we may not even get it done this year. And this is just wrong. This needs to go through. This is a benefit to the country. And I agree with you. It's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it's certainly better than NAFTA. And it just needed to get done. And this is just another example of government just taking way too long to get things done for things that we're supposed to have elected them for. That's what I say.
So yeah, and this is going to kind of screw us going into fiscal year 2020 as well, because think all the taxable revenue that, all the revenue people could have had going into tax season for 2020, the subsidies that they wouldn't have needed to have because they, there would have been more of a market for their beans, for their corn,
Yeah.
for their milk. I
Yep.
keep going
That's a
back
good
to
point.
milk.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I don't know. And, they did this once again as soon as they introduced the articles of impeachment because honestly, I think they knew how unpopular this had become.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and in some ways you think back to when they were, talking about the government shutdown and
Mm-hmm.
everything, and this almost equates to another government shutdown. What the hell are they doing? What are you people doing? You're focused so much on impeachment. It's not happening. And the shutdown, the other thing that came from the shutdown, I just want to throw this out there. Did anybody even about in their daily lives, they even notice? I mean, really? What happened? I mean, it's a little scary to think that you could shut down the government. I don't know how much longer it could have been shut down. Anybody would have taken notice.
Well, I mean, the federal employees noticed, but that was about it.
Yeah, and the one thing I when I heard that, I'm like, okay, yes. And then they had all the sob stories hit the media about how they're not being paid. Almost all of them was on a suspended pay. They got all that pay when they came back to work. That was basically defrayed for that span of time. It's not like they were never going to get it. Most of them got paid. They weren't getting paid during that span of time, yes, but all that money was going to be made up to them when they went back to work, and every last one got pretty much every last cent. So I was not buying any of those sob stories. And just as another sidebar, if you're telling me that you work full time at a pretty decent job and you can't survive a couple of months without income, just a little bit on your savings, it tells me you have no responsibility whatsoever and can't handle money. But that's, again, neither here nor there. But I will say that when it comes to them dragging their feet and not doing what needs to do, that trade agreement could have been, what, January? That could have been done, right? January, February?
Absolutely.
That could have been done.
Well, yeah, and then again, we've got the trading here. This affects. I think this is more than a government shutdown at this point because, like you said, nobody noticed the government shutdown before. But I mean, this really did affect industry in our country, especially in flyover country.
Yeah, it really did. Another reason I hope it goes away quickly.
So, and yeah, I hope this does. I'd hate to say that I want any of these Democrats to have any viability again, but I don't want to have a monoparty system either.
No, you never want to be in a situation where one side just dominates because it's too open to problems. It's too open to corruption. It doesn't work. At the same time, the two-party system, several of our forefathers railed against and warned against. Mm-hmm. And the idea that there is no other party, for example, like the Libertarian Party, cannot get any traction at all. I think some of that is because they kind of refuse to adapt. Mm-hmm. I think if it were me and I was running as a Libertarian, I'd be saying, we really do need to sort of adapt our thinking to the times a little bit. We might get a little more traction if we did that. But yeah, the two-party thing is always, you need it. You can't have one. You just can't have one side just dominate the other because it'll in record time it will lead to problems.
Well, speaking of trade, let's look on the other side of the planet here because it seems like we're getting the first inklings of what happened with the China deal, and it looks like this is actually going to go through. It looks like China has signed on to this as well, and now it's going to get thrown out to Congress to see what it is that they want to do. Now, we don't have a lot that's been leaked to this, which is surprising in this leaky administration that we've had, but from the first looks at what we're seeing out of this, it looks like we are going to have $200 billion worth of trade going back into China at this point, rather than going only one way coming back into us, which is, again, it's going to be huge. And again, it's going to be the raw material producers. It's going to be the agriculture. It's going to be the people that are going to go out and try and feed all of these, 3.2 billion people that live in China.
Yeah. I think it's a good thing. I don't believe, you've noticed over the past, I don't know, years, China has not had a great reputation with Americans for a variety of reasons. And I think there are some people who don't quite understand the necessity of dealing with them as a global power. You sort of have to. You can't ignore them. You can't tell them to go away. You can't not deal with them. And I think the best thing to do is to just make sure that you're not getting the raw end of the deal which I think was Trump's sort of goal from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Again, being a businessman, he is not a big fan of raw end of the deal, and he knows it when he sees it. He says, "Look, how is this any good for us? We got to change this. I don't want to make it one-sided on our side either. Which this should be mutual. We should all benefit from this." So I think that's their goal. When it's something so giant and the countries are so huge and there's so many people involved, it's complicated, and I don't pretend to know even a hundredth of it, but I do know it's pretty essential to do.
Well, one of the big problems that people had with the China deal from the beginning, and the fact that Trump wanted to go and rehash it back out, is the fact that he kept saying we have a trade deficit with China, and we have this, they're selling us all this stuff, and they're tanking our economy, and they're trying to tie our economy to theirs. Shapiro brought up the analogy, and it's been contested in my own mind numerous times because I don't necessarily buy into his logic, but I understand where he's coming from. And his logic is that you've got a massive trade deficit with the grocery store as well. But I don't want to see another global superpower in that light. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, I think I get what he's saying. I don't think you want to see a global superpower in that light. I don't. And when it comes to China, I've always sort of been on the fence. And you get the whole, okay, well, they're communist. One thing, I'm not sure people know this, but they have cities in China. They were essentially started as trial cities that run purely on capitalism.
Okay.
And they are not that they're just like little experimental pockets. And as it turns out, they start producing at a ridiculous rate. And they're starting to pull, and that idea is starting to make some inroads into China. I just wanted to throw that out there. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but they're starting to see that a little bit, that the whole country being communist wasn't really working, and they saw that there might be an opportunity to try this, and all of a sudden, these things are just thriving little hubs of activity. And I don't know. I always thought that was a little interesting point that no one ever really brings up.
Does that mean that if this experiment succeeds and China realizes the error of their ways, rather, that Limbaugh is going to stop saying the Chi comes?
Yeah, well, Limbaugh's also good for a laugh. But he sometimes he says what needs to be said. But you got to think that when it comes to certain things, if you're going too far in one direction, there has to be some sort of correction when things don't go your way for a long enough period of time. And Venezuela and not only that, but let's not forget that Greece had to be bailed out in a lot of ways. Probably shouldn't have been. And, I mean, these things don't work when they go too far in that direction. And to build on that, people always say they want Bernie, they want socialism. They point to a lot of countries in Europe. They say are socialist, and look at how happy they are, look at how well they do, look at Finland, Norway, and Denmark. One thing to take away from all that, and if you do a quick Google search, say ask Google or something, say, is, I don't know, Norway really socialist? They will be screaming from the top of the rooftops that they absolutely are not. They are not a socialist country. They have a lot of government-funded programs like we do. They have, and a little bit more extreme than us, granted, but they do not identify as that. And in fact, many of the countries that people point to and claim as being socialist and being successful are not fully socialist. In fact, in a lot of ways, they're closer to capitalists than they are to socialists. And these are just things that I don't think get enough play. And you got to look at these and look at what these people are saying from those other countries. And look at how they really operate. And same thing with China. Look at exactly what they're doing. It's not full-on communism throughout the entire country. I mean, it is at the core, but you're starting to see some ripples of something else. So it's something to look out for in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe this trade coming out here is gonna help them see, because as far as we go, we're going to remain to be a capitalist nation. I mean, there's no way, without massive force and a lot of casualties in this country, it's not going to change the economic system.
Right.
That is unfortunately the point that we're at this point. We can't do any sort of major change without a massive civil war with a lot of casualties. But I want to point something out as well when we talk about the Nordic countries. Yes, they have the social programs that are the democratic socialism that Bernie Sanders wants to put forward, but Norway also leads the world in antidepressant use.
Mhm.
So it's no wonder they're the happiest country in the world.
I think was the top four are always Norway, Finland, Denmark, and Iceland. I think in terms of the happiness scale.
And those are
But
all the
the
countries that Bernie wants to cite.
and of course he does. But he keeps leaving out important facts that they themselves will say. No, this is not all that we are. Take a look at how we operate. He's just pushing the assistance programs. He doesn't really get that there's other things over there and how they're functioning. And I have to add, and the nationalism and the homogeneous nature of a lot of these countries really does help. Not that I'm against immigration. I'm not. But there is something to be said for it, and we have seen it work in a lot of ways. And I think it's important, and I think we started to see a shift downward when leftists started to confuse patriotism and nationalism with imperialism. Those are not the same things.
No, they're not.
And they think, the assumption is that if you're a nationalist or if you're a proud American, that you automatically are an imperialist and a racist. And those connections really shouldn't be made and never should be made. And in a lot of other countries, they don't even get that because they're so proud of their country. They're so, they're very strongly nationalist, a lot of people in there, and they don't understand how that's a bad thing. It's never been a bad thing. And to assume that it is and to embrace the globalism thing, whole hog, not a good idea. That's my view.
All right. Well, let's move over off of trade for a second and take a look at what's going on in the world of liberty, because the United Kingdom had a massive vote for, I believe they had a parliamentary vote and then a prime minister vote as well. I'm not 100% sure how they operate everything here, but it appears that Boris Johnson is going to remain the prime minister, and the conservative movement absolutely spanked Labour this past week.
Yeah, I noticed. When I got back from Ireland, I did a podcast that said, liberals are starting to lose all over the world, and there's a reason for it. It's because they've just gone too far. And I know the media wants to portray that the majority of the planet is liberal, the majority of this country is liberal, the majority of people in England is liberal. This has never been true. That has always been a flawed perception. And you see that right when I got back, they had done a bunch of elections then too. It was May, and they had done a bunch of elections throughout Europe, and it was flat out conservative sweep in a lot of places. And you're starting to see this pushback simply because it's just gone too crazy. It's gone too insane. And the sane people, they are the majority, stand up and going, no more. We just can't. You've gone off the deep end. We have to bring this back. And however we got to do it, we got to go conservative to stop ourselves from just going completely batcrap crazy. And I really think that's a correction that we're seeing everywhere. And this is just another example of that. I don't want to really weigh in on the whole Brexit thing too much, but I think this is just another example of going. We want to get away from this status quo of liberals always get their way, and this is the way things have to be, and the Conservative Party can never win or shouldn't win, or it's amoral if they win. We need to start using our brains again, and I really think this is just an example of that pushback.
Well, that's the thing that they keep coming to. It's always morality. It's a vote based on feels.
Yeah.
What is it that Ben says? Facts don't care about your feelings?
That is actually the warning that actually Ayn Rand delivered all those years ago, which is if you start running a country based on emotion and sentiment, as opposed to logic and reason and intelligence, you are taking a step back, and it will definitely end in failure. You cannot do that. And it seems to me like the entire Democrat platform is built entirely on emotion, not on facts. Look at that Time magazine cover of Trump towering over the immigrant boy or the girl. It clearly shot in a certain way that he is the tyrant, she is the helpless innocent. And that is a completely manipulative image and view that is even remotely close to accurate in 100 different ways. And that's playing entirely on emotion, nothing but. And that's the kind of thing we can't afford to do. That's regression from a human standpoint.
Oh, the last thing I want to touch on here is the fact that our government has released a series of intelligence documents pertaining to our time spent over in the Middle East and Afghanistan. They have dubbed the Afghanistan Papers. And from what we've all seen from reading these papers, and again, this is something I've started, I have not finished yet, but The fact that we're looking at this now shows us that nobody really knew why we were in Afghanistan, and we were lied to.
Um, I was a freelance reporter for several years.
Mm-hmm.
I was in the I had hundreds of articles published with half a dozen different newspapers. I was never, at the level of CNN or anything. But I will tell you that you're being lied to every day.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not a matter of, it's not even an if. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist. This is just the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
They're selling you a story. There's no matter how, this is what goes back to, they were selling a story. Yes, they absolutely glorified those two because they wanted to sell a story. People were all about the gore and the shock of it, and that's the angle they played, and that's how they sold newspapers. It really hasn't changed. It's just gotten a little more and more and a little worse. If you actually watch the movie His Girl Friday with Cary Grant and Rosalind Russell, it was made in I think in the early 40s, and it highlighted a point where what they called the dark days of journalism, where they would do get a story where they made up anything to sell a paper. And the idea that that never happened, or that that's not still in existence today and has always been in existence, that's wrong. I have had headlines changed. I've had edits made. This is just another example of people, they'll give you a story. There will be facts in there. You will never get the whole truth. You will never get the whole story. They'll save that for a later time. They'll save it for a different kind of headline. It depends on how agenda-driven that publication happens to be. Bottom line is you just have to do as much of your own research as humanly possible. And again, this plays back to being not so lazy and taking that extra step. And I've always said this. I did a whole podcast on how journalism is dead and has been for a long time. And yes, I'm not saying ignore it entirely, but do your research because, yeah, you're being lied to on a daily basis.
Well, and to take that back into the Afghanistan, I mean, we still have people in that country right now. For 20 years, we've been in that region based on, according to these papers, an entire series of lies. People's lives have been lost.
Yeah.
So, at what point do we just pull back at this point? And can we?
Yeah, well, that's the problem. You could let it go this long, it becomes more complicated, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
It becomes a much bigger fiasco when at the time you could have just get the hell out of there. Frankly, I'm not a big fan of babysitting the planet for any particular reason.
No, that's Greta's job.
Yeah, exactly. That's her. Let her do it. Seriously, you know what? And she'll be safe doing it too. So you go do that and bring our people home, because Afghanistan, you're not going to fix those places. You're just not. I was in a political science course in college where the professor stood at the front of the class and said, for as time immemorial, since humankind began, the Middle East has been an absolute mess. You're not going to fix it ever. Mm-hmm. Plain and simple. It's always going to be a problem. And there are certain things that we're just going to have to accept that that's the way it is. In Afghanistan, not much different. So, yeah, I say just get out of there.
Oh, I mean, you're absolutely right. The Middle East is always going to be a mess, and it has been since Abraham was walking around. And from what I understand from reading the Chaldean account of the Genesis narrative, even before that.
Even before that. It's just hopeless.
And then Afghanistan, too. I mean, there's a reason that Carter tried to trick Russia into going and taking Afghanistan. It is not a defensible position. Well, it's defensible if you're an Afghani, but I mean, for an outside force to come and take that it's a horrible position. It's
terrible. Yeah, I have no interest in it. I don't want it. I don't think we should be there. But again, it is just more complicated now.
All right, let's check back in with the live chat here, see what we've got going on here before we talk about the Boogaloo. Looks like I just got Ron Helton over here saying the 800K sent home should have been let go. There was no loss of government service. They were deemed non-essential. That is a good point, actually. I like that idea. Obviously, our government is way too bloated, but, I mean, to have everybody drop off at once, though, the other side is going to be a huge hit to the economy. And we were just kind of in the infancy of the recovery at that point, too, when the government shut down last time. Now, I think we could find work for these people. There are 7 million unfilled jobs, but...
Yeah, and those, we have so many unessential people in government positions and state and federal. It's shocking to me what we're actually paying giant salaries for, and even if it's not giant salary, not do. It needs to be pared back, plain and simple. It's gone too far. We need a much smaller government. And I mean, Trump has said yes, and he has sort of drained the swamp, so to speak, in a lot of ways. There's a lot more that needs to be done. I'm just not sure he's necessarily willing to. I don't think he wants to make any broad strokes. I don't think that's a good idea with the economy being where it is. But yeah, we could stand to lose a few in federal and state government, especially.
And that's the thing. I mean, you're going to have a hard time convincing me that anybody in the government is essential, but
yeah,
I
think there's about 12.
I'm one of those that advocates for the shutdown of the federal government.
The federal government needs to be. I think we need one. But it needs to be so dramatically overhauled that it would have to be torn down and started again, which doesn't. I'm not even sure that's a possible thing.
Well, now we're going to move on and talk about one of our founding states here and the founding ideals that are in that state that are now under threat. Democrats in Virginia, following a big win, are deciding that they're going to push a very strict gun control agenda that may move on to confiscation. I've not been able to find any of the details on what it is that they're trying to do, but from what I understood from the news stories, it looks like they are going to try to enact a transport ban and an ammunition ban, and then a confiscation of certain types of rifle as well. What have you seen on this so far?
I don't know a lot about the story.
Mm-hmm.
I have seen a lot, obviously, of 2A debate this year.
Oh, absolutely. This has been one of the biggest topics we've had this year.
It's a major thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I did a podcast called Confessions of the Conservative. 3 points where I tend to differ a little with people on that side because I'm really not full conservative. I tend to be a little more libertarian in that way. And one of those points, obviously, conservatives are all for 2A and gun rights. And I don't like guns. However, it's in the Constitution. Mm-hmm. It is a right of ours to continually attack it and to continually, you need to show me a lot more in the way of evidence that says that we need to do that. I also did a podcast as to addressing the mass shootings and what seems to be a dramatic and shocking uptick in violent crime and public shootings and public violence in general. And I don't attribute that in any way to guns. I don't think anybody should. That is an environmental thing. It's a toxic environment reaction. It's the world that we live in. It's everything from the food that we eat to the entertainment that we ingest to it's just everything. That is the crux of it, I believe. So to continually, the instant something bad happens where guns are involved, to have them as the scapegoat, I don't agree with. There's too much. It's too complicated of an issue. You cannot point to that one thing and say that's the problem. These people, there are people who are just really nuts, really hostile, really hateful, violent individuals. If they don't get a gun, they're going to get something else, and they're going to do something bad. And when it comes to 2A, when it comes to anything in the Constitution, you need to show me a whole lot of evidence and done by due process. Not this, what the hell started with the impeachment. There was no due process. We're going to do it the way we see fit. No, you want to show me why it should be amended or removed. I want to see those broken down. So far, I haven't seen that, which says, as much as I don't really like guns, I don't want to be around them. It is a right of ours, and you cannot be attacking that and saying that we can't have it or you can't do this until we get to that point where you're showing us decent evidence in due process. You have a majority vote saying this is no longer good. This isn't 1786, blah, blah, blah. Until we reach that point, then I'm sorry, I'm going to be defending the Constitution.
Well, and I mean, I got some Twitch people in the chat that have been watching me play when I do game streaming. I'm playing Fallout New Vegas right now. And even in the post-apocalyptic world, the gun plays a specific defensive point. You're not always, it's open world. You can play however you want. But for the most part, if you play down the storyline that they're trying to feed to you, you're keeping that sidearm on you as a defense. Whether you're going up against the coyotes that are going along the I-15 or the Enclave, the remnants of the U.S. government. You're still reaching for that sidearm out of there. And that's the way I look at the gun debate as far as it goes now. It's the same thing.
Yeah. And I actually, there are times, in a lot of ways, I think women should be armed a lot. I think the world's crazy. I don't see any be. Go right ahead. I think you should be. People are nuts. They have every right to defend themselves. But yeah, I mean, I play games too. I haven't played that one. But
Oh, you should. It's awesome.
I'm more of a I sort of go back and forth. I just finished like this year. I was able to play Assassin's Creed Odyssey and Dragon Quest XI, which was one of my favorites. And actually for 11 years I was actually a video game journalist. I was doing that stuff for a long time, so I was pretty heavily invested in. I'm less so now, but I always like to be able to play. I've just finished Devil May Cry 5. I'm playing Divinity 2 now.
Oh, very nice.
So I come from a long. I mean, got hooked on RPGs back in the PS1 days. So I'm all about maybe that Final Fantasy remake. As much as I hate the idea that they did add a classic mode. I wasn't even going to get it until they did that. The fact that they call it easy pisses me off. But I've never been. I always like shooters. I like the story-driven shooters, and I've been good at the multiplayer ones. So I miss the days of like Medal of Honor and Killzones early when they were really story-driven. I miss, and Singularity was a great story-driven shooter.
I love New Vegas.
Is there a story? Yes, hopefully.
It's a very story. New Vegas versus Fallout 3 is actually much more story driven. That's actually part of the reason I prefer Fallout 3 to New Vegas, because I'm a Diablo guy. I love the dungeon diver aspect of things. But New Vegas
I liked Diablo. The last one was 3, right? Yes.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. I played through that a bunch of times. I liked it. I didn't need to take 13 years, but I liked it.
No, it's got shooter elements, it's got RPG elements, and then it's got that story driven aspect behind it as well that isn't really there in Fallout 3. I think you'd like New Vegas better than 3.
Whenever it comes to open world RPG, I'm always one of those people who I can't get into it no matter how hard I try. It's always that way with Elder Scrolls with me. Like I'm convinced this is the kind of thing I'm going to love, and I try and I just can't do it. And then something like The Witcher 3 came along, and I was like all about it. I love that game to pieces. So I guess it just depends on whether or not it resonates.
I don't know. Well, let's go back onto Virginia here for a second, because we came
way
off of that.
My fault.
Well, we could argue that Fallout 3 takes partially place in Virginia, but we can make that argument. But deputies in Virginia now have declared that some of their counties are going to be Second Amendment sanctuaries, where they are going to refuse to enforce the laws that the government is trying to put onto the books in Virginia.
This one's a problem for me, just because, again, you're going in the direction where you're saying you're going to ignore laws. I get why. I understand it. You're fighting for what you do believe is your right. At the same time, can't we say that the sanctuary cities, they believe it's their right to protect so-called human rights from the so-called evil immigration rules? And is it really that much different? Yes, this is a constitutional right, so you could make that argument. However, this is still basing it off, we're not going to abide by this law or any laws that you pass. We're going to do it this way. That's, I don't know, it's just a dangerous precedent. That's where I sort of separate. When you start doing that, you open up a whole can of worms.
Well, and the thing that, honestly, when I look at this too, this is something we all knew was going to happen. It's just, I'm kind of mad that these deputies came out and made a statement about it, except for the fact that they're putting the middle finger up to the government, and I'm a big supporter of doing that. But the problem that I have with this, of course, is the fact that, yes, this is actually going to happen. I mean, if we do the gun confiscation and they go to do door-to-door, the sheriff in the county that I live in is going to come to my door. I know him. I've shaken hands with him. I'm not particularly keen on law enforcement based on the flag that I have behind me, but I do accept things that I have to do to keep myself safe. So I've shaken hands with the guy, and I know the fact that he's going to come up to the door. He's going to say, "Hey, I need to take your guns." And I said, "I don't have any guns." And he's going to look back at me. He's going to say, "Well, have a nice day."
Right. That's true.
In small town America, that's going to happen all the time.
Sure. Whether or not how effective any of this is going to be is a question.
I think
I think it's more of just a statement, just a general, don't, yeah, you're not going to do this to us, not in this town.
mhm.
We're at least waving the flag and saying that it's just, we're not up, we don't agree with that here. And there is action behind it, an actual resistance of I'm not doing it. But again, we have to be a little bit careful, just because if we want to have law and order, we should at least abide by it to some extent. If you don't like it, we've got a system for it. Vote that out. Say absolutely not. That is not the way that's going to go. We protect our rights, and we need to put people in positions of power who will protect our rights. That's the way the system works. I don't see any reason to change it.
Well, and again, honestly, if they did a nationwide door-to-door gun ban, I think the only people that would actually get disarmed out of that would be repeat
Yeah,
domestic offenders that can't get anything else to stick to them in the courts.
yeah, right. It's going to yield
And the deputies are
nothing.
going to know who those are.
Yeah, right. It will be another one of those things that gets, if it ever happens, would be giant in the news, and the actual impact be like, it's not gonna be as big a deal as people think.
Now, we do need to talk about the reaction to this, though, because that is actually going to, I think, show the nature of why the deputies is doing this and why we have a Second Amendment to begin with. And that's the fact that Northam has threatened to use the National Guard to enforce the law, to use the military to enforce the law if the people on the ground, the sheriff's deputies and the local police, will not enforce that, which that's a scary thought.
Yeah, that again, we're crossing the line into something that's scary. We're
Mm-hmm.
crossing the line into something that should make you sort of stand up and go, wait a minute. There are lines that when you cross them, it's hard to go back. It's
Mm-hmm.
hard to. This already happened. Now we've started sort of a precedent. How far can we really push this? How far? I mean, what point do militias start springing up? I think again we have to make sure that we stay grounded and at least use the system, as flawed as it is, to the best of our ability. And if we need to change it, we change it by the proper venues. And try at least to have some sense of sanity, and while at the same time protecting our freedoms, which is becoming increasingly difficult. I don't know why.
Not sure. The last point that I want to make on this, though, is the fact that in order to pass these laws, they would have to get past Virginia's Supreme Court, which will have to deal with the fact that Virginia's Constitution is more specific on gun rights and the fact that people need to have them than even the U.S. Constitution. The Virginia Constitution outright says that it is your right to have a gun, not anything about a well-regulated militia. It is your right to defend yourself and your property. So if this goes over to the state Supreme Court, I don't think it, unless there's a major part. I don't know how their Supreme Court makeup is in their state, but unless there's some major partisan shift in there, I don't think this has any chance of passage.
No, doesn't sound like it. I mean, unless they're going to take a very bizarre, and maybe some courts are good at twisting words around, but that seems pretty cut and dry to me. And the instant courts start ruling against very cut and dry rulings like that and laws like that is, again, when we start having problems. And I don't really want to see that happen. You want to change things, you change them at the basic fundamental level. You don't change them by overriding the system and saying, nope, that's not a good idea.
All right, let's check in with the live chat here. I think we're starting to wane off on viewership there to the end. War Eternal rather says, "Hey, hi over on Twitch. Thanks for stopping in and checking us out over there." Looks like I've got one more topic on the stack here. So the IG report. Now, how much have you read any of this so far? I know we've mostly had the news reporting on it.
Yeah, no, I've read the news. I'm so afraid of reading the report, like my eyes glaze. I can't do it. I'll try. I will desperately try. It's the kind of thing where I know I'm going to read it and just start falling asleep. But I've certainly seen a lot of the headlines.
Yeah. Well, I read the Mueller report cover to cover.
Oh, good for you.
I'm planning on reading this cover to cover. Like I said at the beginning, I'm 100 pages in, and I am planning on reading the impeachment report, 600 pages cover to cover as well. I don't want to, but I mean,
600 pages?
The impeachment report, yeah, 600 pages.
What? I'm speechless. I don't have anything to say to that. I got nothing. I just wanted to clarify. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, what have you seen on the reports so far, the news reporting on the IG report? Because I mean, it's one of those. To me, it's one of these things like the Sondland testimony, where you can have one TV on that says CNN on it, the other one that has Fox on it, and they're going to say two different things about the exact
Yeah,
same passage.
yeah. Both sides are starting with "it's clear that," and then
Yeah,
saying completely opposite of what the other person just said. How clear is it? I mean,
yeah,
it's clear that this. It's clear that this. Trump said the same thing. It's clear that this. Again, I think we're reaching that point where what we see and what comes out in these reports are so overdone and overbloated. You're giving the media all kinds of carte blanche to say, yeah, take that report, cherry pick whatever you think is going to make this fly, and make a decent headline out of it, and get it in that article. And two different sides are going to cherry pick completely different things. So you're going to end up with, yeah, very different contrasting viewpoints. And some people saying it's so obvious that this is the case, and the other people saying it's not. And you're going to get a lot of fatigue out of that. People are just going to go, oh, so you're telling me I do have to read this thing to get any sort of real view? And then they're going to go, no.
Well, and that's the big part of this that goes along with it as well. Is I mean, the mainstream media is out there with the assumption of the fact that nobody's going to read this thing.
No, they know they're not. Just like they didn't read the 600 pages of the impeachment. They know nobody's going to read that. And they know it. And here's the other thing. They also know that a lot of people, the majority, don't read entire articles either.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
They
absolutely.
hit those first sentences, those first paragraphs. I was taught how to do this. I know how it works. You want to get somebody's attention. You want to get someone involved in the story. You hit with certain points. You don't give them all the salient points and all the absolute details until sort of the end if you can get them to go that far.
Mm-hmm.
So you're getting a lot of people instant reacting to this after reading a few paragraphs of something from like 4 different sources.
Yeah, I was talking about this when Robert from the Generational Gap, which is live now, by the way, and I think those of you who are hanging out over on Twitch still, keep in mind we're gonna raid the Generational Gap when we're done here. But when Robert was on, his co-host John had put an article up in their Discord server talking about why Baby Yoda is a problem, and that was the headline on it. This is why Baby Yoda is a problem. I sat down. It was a Medium article. I sat down and read the entire thing. And 3 paragraphs in, I realized that I had been rickrolled. Legitimately,
That's a common occurrence.
the majority of the article was the lyrics to "Never Gonna Give You Up." And I went back into the Discord server and I said, Medium actually wasted server space on this.
Yeah, yeah. It's you could run experiments and be shocked. Like if I did it for work now, you could run a headline, you could run the first paragraphs, and the last 8 could be, I don't know, a treatise on growing corn. You'd be surprised how many people would still click that and share, and think that this means something. It's again sort of talking to laziness, lower attention spans, and just I saw what I wanted to see.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. And of course they're going to put it in the first few paragraphs, first few lines.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's the same thing too. I mean, a headline is tweetable. An article
Sure.
doesn't fit in 280 characters.
Nope, got to get the good headline. And the fact that you need that good headline. I mean, it's always that again. That has never really not been the case. They've always functioned off headlines. It's how they sold newspapers in the old days. It's how they get people to now. It's just a matter of how you do it. And you have people in social media, people like Facebook, basically telling you what you can and can't say in a headline.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you from experience, there are a lot of words that are not allowed in a Facebook headline, and they're words that you'd be shocked to think. You'd be like, why? And then you really think about it. You really think kind of what Facebook stands for and what they're trying to push. Then you get it. But I don't think people even know that. So,
well, that is a bit more what I wanted to get into this rather than the content, because like I say, I'm not fully onto the content of this, but that is the point. They're releasing these overly bloated documents. I mean, it was 400 pages Mueller report, 500 pages IG report, 600 pages impeachment report. Where, like you said, nobody's going to sit down and read that. They're going to accept what CNN is spoon feeding them, and they're going to get on with their day. They're going to screech about it on Twitter and get on with their day.
yeah, you're talking about a world where people are trading their ideas and beliefs not in a Romanesque way where they have 12 people, 20 people all gathered around drinking and eating for 8 hours at a time, expounding on the latest, greatest news or what's happening and going on these long, unbelievably, tangential speeches. We're a long way from that. We are at the point where go Trump, Dem suck. I mean, we've sort of contracted. So in order to continue to play to that audience, the articles and everything and all the media has had to adapt. And their adaptation is shorter, punchier, and more emotion driven. And I hate to say this, that is just reacting in a way, it's supply and demand. The populace has demanded that this is what they want this to react to. It's sad because it means we're all dumber, but it also is, it's a business like anything else. You want to sell those papers, you want to get people to tune into the radio or TV, you're going to have to sell them a certain way. And in this world, yeah, like you said, you got a certain number of characters to punch that home. Otherwise, they're just scrolling right past. What else we got? I think it's in the world of publishing on Facebook, they say you have 2 seconds, between 2 and 2.5 seconds to get someone interest. Otherwise, they're gone. And in other words, if you got to do that, well, don't be surprised to see some exaggeration.
Well, it's the same thing. I mean, it's part of the reason that the Instagram model works and why people are continuing to sign up for that, even though Zuckerberg is selling their information. I mean, I'm on Instagram. The picture is that 2-second headline. You look at the picture, how many people actually read the captions?
Yeah, not a heck of a lot. Not a heck of a lot of people read, period. We're starting to find.
Which is sad.
It is.
All right. Well, we're going to check the live chat one more time here, I think. All I have here is Gen Gap is live now. So we've got an outro that we've got to talk through. First thing is first. We try to end this show on a... Wow, I can't talk suddenly. We try to end the show on a light note every time because so much of the news is depressing and sad and everything else that goes along with that. So tell us about a hobby that you have that has nothing to do with work or politics. It could be a novel you picked up, an instrument you like to play, a video game that you like to try, just something that helps you unwind as soon as you're done with this mess that we have in DC right now.
Well, we talked about gaming. We did that one. I do like to do that every now and then. Reading, I mentioned. I like to do actually crossword puzzles, and I actually like to garden.
Oh.
Older than I am. But I've also in the past few years become very heavily into fitness more. And it was at first, it was because I wanted to lose weight. I lost 55 pounds. But over time, I started to realize how much of an impact it was having on my mental state, just how therapeutic it is to just move. At the end of a workout, you feel so much better. Your outlook is so much better. It's not just about trimming down or increasing your fitness or having a healthy heart. Those are important things, but the impact it had on my mental state was really what surprised me. And so I really do push that. I row and I lift and I play tennis and I do all these things as much as I can. I turned, I'm 41. So when you're in your 40s, I've run circles around 20-year-olds and it's nice to be able to do. I know I won't be able to do it very long. But I like to be able to do it, and I do emphasize it a lot. I know people think it's more of vanity, and it's really not. Especially when you get older, it's not. It just has a profoundly positive impact on your life in so many ways. So, when I went to Ireland, I didn't rent a car. I biked everywhere. I climbed the country's highest mountain. I kayaked. I did everything I could do to stay as active as I could. And when you're outside. And when or even when you're not outside, even if I jump on the rowing machine, at the end of that, you feel like you've really done something. And your brain is very, like I said, when we said unplug, that's a great thing to do when you unplug. It doesn't even matter what it is. Some people like to, get on a machine. Some people like to go run around a track, whatever it is. It really helps a lot. So I think that's something I want to throw out there. I want more people to see the mental side of that. It's not vanity. It's not having a great body. It's not being able to, run so much and so many miles, so much time. It's about getting your mindset in the right place. And it really helps, I will say.
Well, thanks for coming by here. And thanks to the audience for checking out live on DLive, Twitch, and YouTube. Looks like we got a pretty decent audience from everybody. I was watching the analytics, and we got all three of the big platforms coming on. So that's nice. We want to see DLive expand a little bit. If you want to finish the conversation with me, you can reach out to me. The best place to do is going to be on Twitter. That is at EdsBlog Twitter with a 1 in place of the I. Or below you on most platforms or above you on Facebook are going to be some other ways you can get in contact with me, my Gab, my Minds, just other ways we can go through and finish the conversation. If you want to finish the conversation with Ben, well, tell us where they can find you.
Yeah, anytime someone wants to get me, the Common Sense American, it's easy to get me on Twitter. I think I'm the only Common Sense American on there, but it's obvious. I have 10,000 plus followers. You can see it. There's links to my site. I just started a Facebook page, but the best way to get me is definitely on Twitter. You also find me on iTunes, Spotify, and Stitcher. iTunes being a bigger one right now, and obviously it must be a much bigger platform, I guess, because I'm getting a lot more traction on that.
And that is the Twitter, the Facebook, and I believe your Buzzsprout link are linked in the description as well. So go over there and check that out. And
Yep.
thanks again, once again, for checking us out. If you're just catching us up at the end of this, you can catch us on demand on YouTube again or over on BitChute.com. We always post the episodes over there. Make sure you like and subscribe the videos as you see them. Or if you want to catch us on the go, once again, we are on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play for this episode. And if you're on iTunes for either his episodes or mine, make sure you leave that 5-star rating and a good review. That always helps us move up the charts. That's how they do their algorithms, and that's how we try and get past the gatekeepers for sure. Lastly, we are partnered with the Freedom Scoop Media Group, and those of you on Twitch, keep on with us because we're going to head on over and raid the generational gap as soon as we're done here. But go check out freedomscoop.com. We've got some other great podcasts over there. Stephen Ignoramus is linked up over there. The generational gap is over there. We're over there. All of our episodes there. All my gaming, all my solo videos, everything you can find right on freedomscoop.com. And if you want to write for a free speech platform, reach out to me. We'll get you a sample article, and we will see if we can't get you on the site. As we always say on this show, never take the words of bloggers, podcasters, or journalists as gospel. Find all the facts and draw your own conclusions. Ben, why don't you give us the last word?
I'm going to second that. That's a great way to end it. Absolutely do your own research, find your own truths because they are out there, but in this world it's gonna take some digging. So just do it.
And that is going to be all for us. And take care, everyone. And for those of you who are still on Twitch, I'm shutting down the other platforms here. Stick with us here, and we're going to go over and raid the generational gap. So let's wait for that to catch up. Come on, don't be slow. I suppose I should have just left my tablet over here. That probably would have helped made this whole situation go a little bit quicker. Suppose I should have just left my tablet over here.
Oh,
that
now I
probably
hear
would have
myself
helped.
talking. Oh, good. The echo. That's always fun.
And in just a few seconds, we will be over there. All right, and you and I are clear.
Okay, cool. I hope that was all right. Never really done that.
No, that was great. I'm really happy with how all of that turned out. That's that's going to be really good. What do we got?
Good. Yeah, I mean, I've it's so weird. When I was doing journalism stuff, I conducted a lot of I interviewed everybody. Oh, back then, everybody from Kelly Clarkson to Lewis Black, and I'm the one who always had to come up with the questions and things. So it's weird to sort of be on the side of that, just a little, because I've done it a few times, just a little bit of radio stuff with other people, but I've never really done like a big long thing like this. So I'm glad it worked out.
No, it was great.
Like ants, an ant colony
I'm
will attack
really
another ant
happy
colony
to have you here. I hope to have you back here at some point, unless I, wind up getting. I'm working on having a co-host, and she hasn't confirmed with me yet. But another Twitch streamer that I followed and actually wound up having on the show used to do a political podcast with a partner before, and yeah, she and I talked about doing that, but she hasn't confirmed with me yet whether or not she's going to do it. So I think that's going to be